Hey everyone, welcome to my monthly Patreon voted review. This month's winner is Batsu Gun, coming out in the sudden death final round, so thanks so much for my patrons for taking part in the voting and supporting the channel, of course. And so Batsu Gun, for those who are not familiar, it holds the honor of being considered the very first bullet hell Danmaku shmup, which is a big deal to me, of course, because that is my favorite style of shmup and my favorite subgenre within the genre. And what's also interesting about Batsu Gun is it's not only the first bullet hell, but it is also the final toe plan shmup. It's kind of like a Final Fantasy situation where it was their final game, well, their final shmup anyway, but it didn't work out. It didn't end up becoming this massive commercial success and spawning series into the future and all that. But what it did do is it did create the subgenre that I think are most identified with shmups. It's kind of how people view modern shmupping, and is personally my favorite. So yeah, bullet hell. So let's get started just talking about the game itself. I think from a gameplay feel, you can definitely tell there is some DNA connecting Batsu Gun with Danpachi and Dodonpachi. It is definitely there. Not only with the big changes that were the landmark changes that consider it a bullet hell, which is the reduced hitbox. I think the hitbox is still a bit bigger than you'll find in Dodonpachi and stuff like that, but you can tell when you're playing it, oh, this is a reduced hitbox, and also the way the bullets spawn and stuff. I don't think they're quite like modern day bullet hells. I think they're a bit faster. It actually feels at times like you're playing a Psycho game more than playing a cave game. But then there's also moments where, especially in the boss fights, we're like, okay, this is very cave-like. So yeah, the DNA is still there. This is one of my favorite shmups. I do think I like it more than Danpachi, to be honest. I'm not sure if it's a better game than Danpachi, but I do like playing it more than Danpachi, I will say that. And so let's just begin by talking about some of the basic stuff here. So there are 3 ship types, just like you get in Dodonpachi. However, these ship types are pretty different. So type A, I like to think of this as your Raiden ship. It's a very generic sort of Raiden looking spaceship, and it has that red spread like you get in Raiden, and then the missiles supporting it. It's a solid ship. It's pretty good. A little bit generic. Nothing really that's all that interesting. And then there's Type B, the moneymaker. This is the ship to play. So Type B uses this lightning laser, and you can see, okay, I'm not sure if this is the first game in shmups to use this style of attack, you know, the Dodonpachi-ish laser. But it's one of the first ones that I can think of, and man is it glorious. A little hint though is that make sure when you're using this that you have auto fire on, or the rapid fire within the game on, because even if you hold the A button and it looks like, oh, this is a continuous shot, it's actually not as powerful as if you use auto fire, which I learned, and that's going to be really handy for you. And I believe this is definitely the strongest ship in the game. I remember Jamers commenting on this when I asked him back in Callus Cup which ship to play. He's like, Type B is the best. And when you look at high-scoring replays, they all seem to be using Type B. And then there's Type C, the lonely sort of split-shot, bizarre ship. I'm not really a big fan of this ship, so here's a little bit of gameplay of what it looks like. But really, when it comes down to it, we all know Type B is where it's at. That's the moneymaker. And as I'll explain a little bit when you get into the scoring, I don't know if playing the different ship types is all that interesting like you would in something like a Dodonpachi, you know, because of the different scoring strategies each ship does. But we'll get to that when we get to the scoring section. So let's also just comment on some of these basic changes that Batsu Gun made compared to its predecessors that considers it the first bullet hell. The big one, the big one, or the small one I guess, is that the hitbox has been reduced down. It is not as small as, you know, something like a Futari, a Ketsui, or even a Dodonpachi hitbox, but it is definitely reduced. You can tell when you're playing, this has more of a bullet hell feel when it comes to that hitbox compared to something like a Gradius or Blazing Star or R-Type or something like that, right? Another change this game makes, of course, is how the bullets sort of interact with the player, where you're doing more sort of shepherding them, controlling the space, using those bullet hell strats that I go over in How to Shmup. Those apply more to Batsu Gun compared to other shmups. especially old. And I'm a pretty good barometer for this because I feel like in the skill spectrum, I'm very, very good, well, relatively, in the bullet hell genre, and pretty in like regular shmups, like old school style shmup, because the way you approach them and play them and route them is very different. And I feel like Batsu Gun actually feels the most like a Psycho game to me, with some like cave-ish elements in there. It doesn't feel full-on Dodonpachi Ketsui, but it also doesn't feel like these old like Raiden and stuff like that either. It's kind of that middle ground, something more like a Psycho game, especially with the bullet speeds. Those are much faster bullets, I guess second loop speed bullets maybe, but much faster bullets than you typically see in today's bullet hells. Another thing to comment on is that they are relatively short levels, except stage 4, which is like 2 levels mashed together. I guess, you know, that's a cave thing to do, right? There's another cave sort of thing where the beginning levels are shorter than stages 4 and 5 are these longer. 4, I think, though, especially goes on a very long time. And then it has this insane boss fight at the end. But yeah, shorter levels, 1 loop. I think that is super interesting. And we'll comment a little bit more on that when we get to the scoring. But yeah, it's just a 1 loop. I came very close to clearing the game while gathering the footage, so I feel like keep an eye out on the channel, because I'll probably do a 1-all of this and do a little commentary and stuff like that. But yeah, 1 loop. It does have, I do have to comment, some of the level design in this game is a little bit suspect. There's a few moments, especially stages 4 and 5, where enemies, if you're not familiar with the stage, will just spawn behind you and on top of you, and I think in pretty unfair fashions. Especially stage 5, where it'll have these medals, and you go to get the medals, and as you're going to get them, an enemy just spawns on screen extremely quickly and will kill you. And there's some of these gotcha moments that I think are pretty weak as far as the level design that Moving Forward Cave got away from. But they do exist in this. Not a big deal once you learn all the stages and stuff, but if you're playing this game for the first time, I think it'll be doubtful you'll get it cleared, not only because of the fast bullet speeds and the Psycho-ish gameplay, but also because you're going to get got by some of these moments where enemies are just randomly spawning out of places without any sort of warning. Another fun fact or fun part about this shmup is it an RPG, right? It has this leveling experience system, which is pretty cool. So when you kill enemies, you kind of have this in Zero Ranger, where you get little XP when you kill things, except that's for score. And in this, it's not for score. Instead, the XP goes towards your power laser. And I have to say, the power-up in the game is pretty glorious. When you level up, it clears the screen a little bit. I don't know if it kills enemies, I can't recall, but it does eat the bullets off the screen. It always scares me because I always think I died. And it goes level up, and then you gain a significant power boost between 1, 2, and 3. I think there's always like this 4. I don't know if I ever hit level 4, if that actually exists, but I know 1, 2, and 3. It's a significant boost. And what's fun is that the Type B ship starts getting more screen coverage rather than just having that narrow laser. It starts getting like homing and wide shots. I think that ship is just super cool. That's why I just say play Type B, because, I mean, you're not playing Batsu Gun if you're not playing Type B, at least in my opinion. And so, yeah, that's basically all the things about it, the level up system. So let's start talking about the scoring system, which I think is pretty strange. And I don't want to be too critical, but I don't think it's really all that good. I think it's serviceable, but kind of strange. So the way scoring works in the game is, fundamentally thinking, is that there's these medals, kind of like stars in Dodonpachi, where you pick them up, you know, you earn them killing enemies and stuff like that, and then if you don't die, you cash them out at the end of the stage for score. And I thought, oh, okay, that's a solid scoring system, a little bit rudimentary, but solid enough. But this game has all kinds of other strange scoring mechanics that are more along the lines of sort of being like secrets and hidden mechanics rather than being built into the fundamental gameplay, which is why I don't like the scoring system of this game all that much, because it does feel a little bit gimmicky when you compare it to something like Dodonpachi or other cave games, where they're really good at baking in the scoring with the level design and the fundamental gameplay. Batsu Gun doesn't really have that. It's more about just surviving to the end and then also knowing the secrets. And so there's a few little things that you get for secrets. One are these pigs that you spawn by doing certain things and certain. It's kind of like in Raiden, right? You got to know where they are. You got to know how to trigger them. I didn't really bother to look up how to trigger them. There's some on one of the stages that are pretty easy to trigger, but yeah, knowing how to get the pigs to go. The big money maker, though, is the Jupiter Milk, which is this. So stage 4 boss, which is a crazy boss fight. You end up having to do all these sort of like weird safe spot manipulations. I'll put some footage here on the screen from when I did it in Callus Cup. But you have to do all these sort of weird safe spot manipulations, and then it breaks and spawns these robots, and then you blow them up with a bomb and shoot them. You get way more score doing this than if you like no-missed the entire game without doing it. I mean, the Jupiter Milk is worth a lot of points. It's kind of where you make your money. And then there's also, I believe in stage 5, if you're leaving certain robots alive. I'm not super familiar with this. I was looking over Jamer's gameplay, and he was leaving some notes about that. But Jamers himself also commented that the scoring of this game is more about knowing how to exploit these secrets and stuff, rather than in something like Donanpachi or, you know, other cave games where you're engaging with the sort of fundamental scoring system. So in that way, I don't think the scoring system is bad, but I don't think it is all that good. But I think Cave was aware, or Toplan, I guess, was aware of this, but we'll get to that a little bit later because they do something to address this. And so let's also just quickly note the Saturn port, because I think people will be interested. So I have my Saturn up and running. I played this on the Saturn, and from what I can tell, the Saturn port does seem to be very accurate. I don't know. You know, it's really hard to know how accurate these ports are unless you are an expert player of the game or there's notes on this and stuff. But it, to me, does seem to be, on the surface, pretty damn accurate. It's not like a Donanpachi situation where 1 minute in you realize they forgot to add in the chaining correctly or something like that. The graphics and all that stuff also seem to be very faithful to the arcade. So I'll put them side by side here, and you can kind of compare. But I do think the Saturn port is pretty solid, especially since the Saturn port includes the special edition, which I think is a really big deal. So yeah, overall, a bare bones port because it is on the Saturn, so we're not going to get stuff like stage select or training mode. That stuff just wasn't really a thing at the time, and that was really uncommon. So I'm not going to hold that against the port all that much. At the same time, do I think you have to buy the port? You have to spend hundreds of dollars on it or mod your Saturn? I don't think so. I think you can emulate it in RetroArch and have a good time. It emulates extremely well there. I'm sure it emulates well in MAME. But if you're interested in playing on the console version, I think the console version is solid. And of course, if you're going to play Batsu Gun in like a AGDQ or some kind of Japanese event where they don't allow for emulation, the Saturn port is a much better go than something like the Saturn Donanpachi or Donpachi ports. So yeah, shout outs to the guys who did it. I think overall very solid port. And one thing I did notice is I think it is missing some slowdown. But the thing about Batsu Gun is slowdown is kind of a thing, but it's not that big of a deal. That might make more of a difference in the special edition. And I went on this pretty massive run in the special edition. I got into the second loop pretty far, almost cleared the second loop. But the thing about it is, and it seemed to play very well, but the thing about it is that the footage was not captured for some reason. And so I didn't have the heart to do it again because that took me a while to get there. And so I'm not entirely sure if you go real deep into the special edition, if that's where the slowdown missing becomes an issue. But for the most part, playing arcade mode and just kind of your average gameplay, I don't think it's a big deal at all that there's a tiny bit of missing slowdown. And so let's end this review by talking about what I think is actually the most interesting thing about Batsu Gun, which is the special edition version, which is included on the Saturn port. So you can play this on the Saturn port, you just got to go to options and enable it. So the special edition, I think, was Toplan realizing, okay, this game kind of doesn't have a very good scoring system, so let's try and give it a good scoring system, or a better scoring system. So the special edition's changes is it's a more bullet hell-ish than before, where I said the arcade version kind of feels like a Psycho game. The special edition feels more like a cave game, actually. So they slow down the bullets a bit, They give you an extra shield, which is pretty cool. They reduce that hitbox down even more, so now you're kind of in the Dodonpachi area-sized hitbox. And instead of being one loop, now you got 4 loops. And I think now the scoring, they also make some changes with the pigs and the medals, a little bit here and there with the scoring. I didn't really want to get too nitty-gritty into the details, because I think all in all, what it comes down to is if you want to play Batsugun for score, I actually think that the Special Edition is the way to go. And on Jamer's channel, you should definitely check out his counter stop of the Special Edition. It's actually really cool to watch. Yeah, so I actually like the Special Edition more than the Arcade Edition, and if I played a lot of Batsugun outside of just clearing it, if I was going for score or trying to get a high score or get a counter stop like Jamer's, I think the Special Edition is the way to go, because I think there's more to the scoring system in that regard. So overall, these are my thoughts on Batsugun. An amazing, really fun shmup. I guess one other issue I had with the overall gameplay is there is a little bit of bullet visibility problems with it, where the bullets aren't blending into the background like in a Grega, but there's so much crap going on screen that sometimes it can be hard to tell where the enemy bullets are, especially with their speeds and stuff like that. That is one issue. I'm not exactly sure what they could have done. Maybe added a little bit more transparency to the player shot, I thought maybe. Like transparent out a little bit so that the enemy bullets are a little bit more visible. Because sometimes what happens, especially when you get into the later stages, is you're all powered up, is you're covering the screen in bullets, which feels awesome. But at the same time, it's a little bit hard to tell where the enemy bullets can be when it gets a little bit more hectic. But overall, Batsugun, such a fun game. Definitely recommended. For the people who like the Saturn port, I think the Saturn port is solid. And I'm not going to hold the fact that it doesn't have like stage select and stuff like that against it, because at the time it was created, that wasn't really a thing. Whereas now, if you do a Batsugun port now and you don't have those things, I'm going to be critical of that. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense to people, where I do judge things based on their time, which some people seem to think that I don't. But if it's bad at its time, it's bad. But this is an example of it was good for its time. So I think the Saturn port is solid overall. Thanks so much for tuning in, and let me thank my patrons. So thanks to Dingo, Anthony A, Ben Wynn, Brian Shiver, Corio, Dunpeel 2064, Eric H, Full Set, Retro Shmupper, Gus, Kiwi, Joe Angelo, John, Gameboy Guru, Kay, Quentin, Malaise, Mark Sloan, Martin Worrell, Maz, Meher Calendrian, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Ogla Kugels, Point Blank STG, Rhizosis, Smacky Factor, Plasmo, Sagumo, and Utakaya. Also, I do have my Patreon exclusive podcast that if you're interested, or if you want to take part in the voting, yeah, I definitely encourage you to join the Patreon for that. And I will be posting some clips from that here. We're 4 weeks in, so we're about to get the fourth episode. Thanks so much for tuning in.